Hey there, welcome back to Story Slices, where we slice through the best Reddit tales just for you. Let's dive right into the first story. The first one is the Tittle story, and it starts like this. After years of renting and saving every spare penny, I finally achieved my dream of homeownership last spring. It wasn't anything fancy, just a modest 3-bedroom ranch with good bones and a surprisingly spacious backyard that immediately stole my heart. The house sat at the edge of a middle-class neighborhood, bordering a much more upscale community known for its perfectly manicured lawns and expensive homes. During the purchasing process, my realtor had mentioned in passing that the fancy neighborhood next door had a notorious HOA, but since my property wasn't part of it, I didn't think much about it. My focus was on finally having a place to call my own after a decade of dealing with landlords and rent increases. The first few weeks after moving in were a whirlwind of unpacking, painting, and making small repairs. A couple of my immediate neighbors stopped by to welcome me, bringing the usual housewarming gifts, plants, bottles of wine, and baked goods. One older gentleman who lived 2 doors down, Mr. F, as I'll call him, lingered longer than the others, offering to help me with some yard work. "Just wanted to give you a heads up about the folks from the estates," he said, gesturing toward the fancier homes visible beyond my back fence. "They've got a pretty aggressive HOA and they sometimes forget where their boundaries end." I laughed it off. Well, thankfully that's not my problem. My property isn't part of their HOA. "Just be prepared," he warned. "Their board president thinks she runs the whole zip code." I thanked him for the warning but didn't think much of it. I was too excited about making my new house a home. The backyard became my passion project. I spent weekends clearing overgrown shrubs, power washing the concrete patio, and gradually transforming it into my personal oasis. I installed string lights in a crisscross pattern overhead, built a fire pit surrounded by Adirondack chairs, and set up a decent grill station. Nothing fancy or excessive, just a comfortable outdoor space where I could relax and occasionally entertain friends. By midsummer, I felt settled enough to host a combination housewarming/birthday celebration. I sent invitations to about 20 to 25 friends, planning a casual Saturday afternoon barbecue that would likely extend into the evening. I even dropped notes in my immediate neighbors' mailboxes, letting them know about the upcoming gathering and providing my phone number in case the noise became bothersome. The day of the party arrived with perfect weather, clear skies, a light breeze, and temperatures in the mid-70s. Friends started arriving around 3 p.m., bringing side dishes, drinks, and small housewarming gifts. The atmosphere was exactly what I'd hoped for. Relaxed, joyful, with background music providing ambiance without drowning out conversation. We played some lawn games, grilled burgers and vegetables, and enjoyed each other's company. Around 7 p.m., just as the string lights began twinkling in the dusk, I was mid-conversation with a college friend when I noticed a commotion at my back gate. 3 people, 2 women and a man, were entering my yard uninvited. The woman in the lead was middle-aged with an expensive-looking haircut and a grim expression that suggested she'd smelled something unpleasant. Before I could even approach them to ask why they were in my yard, the woman's voice cut through the party chatter. "This gathering needs to end immediately," she announced loudly enough that several conversations stopped abruptly. "You're in violation of at least 5 HOA regulations." Confused, I stepped forward. "Excuse me, who are you, and why are you in my backyard?" She looked at me as if I were deliberately playing dumb. "I'm the president of the Estates Homeowners Association. This," she gestured disparagingly at my party setup, "violates our noise ordinances, decorative guidelines, and gathering restrictions. No outdoor events are permitted after 6 p.m. without board approval, which you clearly didn't seek." "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, trying to keep my tone even. "My property isn't part of the estates. I'm not in your HOA." The woman, I'll call her the HOA president, gave a dismissive laugh and turned to her companions as if sharing a private joke. "We hear that all the time. Your property falls within our jurisdiction according to the original development plans." She pulled out a folded paper from her purse. "This is the community map. All properties within this boundary are subject to our covenants." I glanced at the map she thrust toward me. It was clearly outdated, showing a development plan that had never fully materialized. My house had been built years after that initial plan was abandoned. "That map is outdated," I explained. "My deed and property records clearly show I'm not part of any HOA. I never signed any HOA agreement when I purchased this house." "Ignorance of the covenants doesn't exempt you from following them," she snapped. "The fact is, these," she gestured at my string lights, "tacky decorations are visible from association properties. The noise from your gathering is disturbing our residents. And those tiki torches are a fire hazard we explicitly prohibit." By this point, several of my friends had gathered around, watching the exchange with expressions ranging from confusion to anger. One friend, who happened to be a real estate attorney, quietly approached me. "They're trespassing," she whispered. Your property is definitely not in their HOA. I looked at the survey when you were buying the place, remember? The HOA president noticed our whispering and raised her voice. You have 15 minutes to end this gathering and remove these decorations, or we'll be forced to issue fines and potentially take legal action. We don't tolerate this kind of behavior in our neighborhood. This isn't your neighborhood, I countered, my patience wearing thin. You're currently trespassing on my property. I'd like you to leave. Instead of backing down, she pulled out her phone and began taking photos of my backyard and my guests. What do you think you're doing? I demanded. Documenting the violations for our records, she replied coolly. The board will need evidence when we process the fines. One of my friends stepped forward. You can't photograph people without their consent. Stop that immediately. The HOA president ignored him and continued taking pictures, even moving closer to capture faces. Several guests began to look uncomfortable, and the festive atmosphere had definitely soured. That's when the HOA president's male companion stepped toward my music setup and actually turned it off mid-song. That's enough of that noise, he declared. Something in me snapped. You need to leave my property right now, I said firmly. You're trespassing, and you just put your hands on my personal property without permission. We'll leave when this party is shut down, the HOA president countered. Otherwise, I'm calling the police. Please do, I replied, pulling out my own phone. Save me the trouble. And while we wait for them, I'll be recording your trespassing and harassment for my records. I began recording video of the 3 HOA representatives standing in my yard. This visibly rattled them, but the HOA president doubled down, stepping aside to make a call, presumably to the police. While this was happening, my real estate attorney friend gathered a few other guests and they quietly began collecting names and contact information from everyone present, anticipating that we might need witness statements later. Within about 20 minutes, a police car pulled up in front of my house. 2 officers approached through the side gate, taking in the scene. A backyard gathering with confused guests and 3 overdressed individuals standing apart from the group. We received a noise complaint, one officer said. What's going on here? The HOA president immediately stepped forward. Officer, I'm the president of the Estates Homeowners Association. This property is violating multiple community guidelines with this unauthorized gathering. I calmly explained my side, that my property wasn't part of their HOA, that these individuals had entered my backyard uninvited, interfered with my gathering, photographed my guests without permission, and touched my personal property. The officer asked to see identification from everyone involved and then requested clarification about the property boundaries. I showed him my deed and property records, which I'd fortunately kept organized in a file cabinet inside. The HOA president produced her outdated development map again. After reviewing the documents and making a few calls, the officer confirmed what I already knew. My property was indeed not part of the estate's HOA. Ma'am, the officer addressed the HOA president, it appears this property is not within your association's jurisdiction. Additionally, entering someone's property without permission and interfering with their gathering could potentially constitute trespassing. That's absurd, she sputtered. Our records clearly show. Your records are outdated, the officer interrupted. The current county records are what matter legally. Now, as for the noise complaint, I'm not hearing anything excessive. The music is currently off, and the conversation level seems reasonable for the time of day. There are no local noise ordinances being violated at this time. The second officer had been speaking with some of my neighbors, including Mr. F., who had apparently come over when he saw the police arrive. Sir, the second officer reported to his colleague, the neighbors confirm this gathering hasn't been disruptive. One gentleman also mentioned this isn't the first time the HOA has tried to exercise authority beyond their boundaries. The HOA president's face flushed red. We maintain standards for the entire area. If we didn't, property values would plummet because of situations like this. She gestured vaguely at my backyard. Whether you agree with the aesthetics or not, the first officer said firmly, you don't have jurisdiction here. I'd advise you to leave this property now and restrict your HOA activities to homes that are actually part of your association. Reluctantly, the 3 HOA representatives left, but not before the HOA president turned to me and said, this isn't over. The board will be discussing this incident. After they left, the officers apologized for the disruption and advised me to consider filing a formal report about the trespassing incident, especially if it happened again. They suggested I might want to put up no trespassing signs at my property line as an added precaution. Once the police left, I tried to salvage the party, but the mood had definitely shifted. Some guests had already decided to call it a night, and those who remained were more interested in discussing what had just happened than enjoying the celebration. My birthday/housewarming had effectively been ruined. The following day, I was still seething about the incident. What should have been a joyful milestone, my first party in my first home, had been tarnished by the entitlement and overreach of strangers who thought their fancy neighborhood rules extended to my property. I decided I wasn't going to let this go. Not just for myself, but because Mr. F's comments and the police officer's discovery suggested this wasn't an isolated incident. How many other homeowners had been bullied or intimidated by this HOA? My first step was filing the trespassing report the officers had suggested. I went to the local police station with my video recording, property documents, and a written statement describing the incident. The officer who took my report mentioned that there had indeed been previous complaints about this particular HOA, though most people didn't follow through with formal reports. Next, I contacted my friend the real estate attorney and asked for her professional advice. She offered to look into the situation more thoroughly and suggested we gather evidence of any pattern of HOA overreach. If they've been attempting to enforce their rules on properties outside their jurisdiction, especially if they've been collecting fines, that could potentially be fraud, she explained. Over the next few weeks, I embarked on what can only be described as an investigative mission. I started by researching the estate's HOA online, finding their website and public records of their board meetings. I also walked my neighborhood, introducing myself to homes that, like mine, bordered the estates but weren't part of it. These conversations proved illuminating. Several homeowners shared similar experiences of HOA representatives showing up on their property, claiming jurisdiction, and threatening fines for everything from unmowed lawns to unapproved paint colors. Most had simply complied to avoid conflict, even though they weren't legally bound by the HOA rules. One neighbor, a woman who had lived in her home for over a decade, admitted she'd actually paid fines to the HOA on multiple occasions for violations like having a vegetable garden visible from the street and installing a basketball hoop for her children. I just assumed they had some authority, even though I knew I hadn't signed anything when I bought the house, she told me. They were so confident, and I didn't want trouble. Through public records requests, my attorney friend discovered that the estate's HOA had gradually expanded their claimed territory over the years, far beyond what their official documentation supported. Their official filed maps with the county recorder's office showed a much smaller jurisdiction than what they were actually attempting to enforce. Most disturbing was learning that the HOA president owned a local real estate business specializing in properties within the estates. She had a financial incentive to maintain high property values in and around the development, which explained her zealous enforcement of regulations even where she had no authority. Armed with this information, I sent a certified cease and desist letter to the HOA board, ceasing each board member individually at their home addresses, which were public record as part of the HOA documentation. The letter, drafted with my attorney friend's help, outlined the specific incident of trespassing and harassment at my property. Documentary evidence that my property was not within their jurisdiction. Evidence of their pattern of overreach to other non-HOA properties. A formal demand that they cease all attempts to enforce their regulations on my property. A request for written confirmation that they acknowledged my property's independent status. 2 weeks passed with no response, so I took the next step, organizing the affected homeowners. I invited everyone I'd spoken with to a meeting in my backyard, the same space the HOA had tried to control. About 15 homeowners attended, each with their own story of HOA intimidation. Together, we drafted a joint complaint to the county recorder's office about the HOA misrepresentation of their boundaries. We also compiled a list of improper fines that had been collected from non-HOA properties, which my attorney friend suggested could form the basis of a class action lawsuit if necessary. But before pursuing legal action, I decided to try one more direct approach. I learned that the HOA held monthly board meetings that were technically open to the public, though they were usually attended only by homeowners within the association. Their next meeting was scheduled for the following Tuesday evening at their community clubhouse. I prepared a presentation including maps, property records, and testimonials from affected homeowners. I also invited a reporter from the local newspaper, framing the story as one about community boundaries and homeowner rights. When I arrived at the meeting with 5 other non-HOA homeowners and the reporter in tow, the HOA president's expression was a mix of shock and anger. She tried to prevent us from speaking during the public comment period, claiming we weren't eligible community members, but several actual HOA residents in attendance objected, curious about why outsiders had shown up in such numbers. When I was finally allowed to speak, I calmly presented our case. Their HOA had been systematically attempting to enforce regulations beyond their legal boundaries and had even collected unauthorized fines from non-member properties. I provided copies of my documentation to each board member and explained that we were prepared to pursue legal remedies if the situation wasn't addressed. "We're not here to cause trouble," I concluded. "We're simply asking that you respect property boundaries and acknowledge that your authority ends at the borders of your actual HOA territories as legally defined." What I hadn't anticipated was the reaction from the actual HOA members in attendance. Many seemed genuinely shocked to learn about their board's overreach. One elderly gentleman stood up and explained that he'd served on the original HOA board years ago, and the current claimed territory was at least 30% larger than what had been established at the foundation. The meeting devolved into something of an inquisition, with HOA members demanding answers from their board about these practices. The HOA president attempted to defend their actions as maintaining neighborhood standards, but her position weakened as more residents voiced concerns about potential legal liability for the association. By the meeting's end, the HOA board agreed to form a committee to review their territorial claims and enforcement practices. The HOA president abstained from the vote, her face tight with anger. The newspaper ran a story the following week with the headline, "Local HOA accused of overstepping boundaries," literally. It detailed our allegations and included quotes from both affected non-HOA homeowners and concerned HOA residents. The public exposure accelerated the HOA response. Within days, I received a formal letter acknowledging that my property was not within their jurisdiction and apologizing for the misunderstanding during my backyard gathering. Similar letters went out to all the homeowners we'd identified as being falsely claimed by the HOA. The real bombshell came 2 weeks later when the HOA held an emergency board meeting. According to several residents who attended, the committee's investigation had revealed that under the HOA president's leadership, the association had collected over $40,000 in improper fines from non-HOA properties over the past 5 years. The board voted to return these funds, issue formal apologies, and, most satisfyingly, request the HOA president's resignation. She resigned the following day, citing personal reasons, but everyone knew the truth. Her reputation in the community was tarnished, and I later heard that her real estate business suffered as former clients questioned her integrity. The HOA board underwent a significant restructuring, with several new members elected who promised transparency and strict adherence to their actual jurisdiction. They even invited representatives from bordering non-HOA properties, including me, to attend quarterly meetings as non-voting participants to maintain open communication about any concerns between our communities. To celebrate this victory for property rights, I hosted another backyard barbecue, larger and more festive than the first. I invited all the non-HOA neighbors who had joined our cause, and to my surprise, several residents from the estates also asked if they could attend. Among them was the elderly gentleman who had spoken up at the meeting, along with the new HOA board president. "We want to be good neighbors," the new president told me, raising a glass in toast. "Real neighbors, not overlords." As summer turned to fall, something unexpected happened. The boundaries between the estates and the surrounding homes began to blur in a different way. Instead of the HOA trying to impose their will on us, residents from both areas started collaborating on community initiatives, a neighborhood watch program, a shared garden at the boundary line, and even a multi-neighborhood block party. The final bit of satisfaction came about 6 months later when I learned that the former HOA president had sold her house and moved to a different county. The new owners, a young couple with 3 children, painted their front door a bright turquoise color that would have given the former president an aneurysm. Sometimes I sit in my backyard under those string lights that cause so much controversy, enjoying the fire pit and the sound of neighbors chatting over fences that once seemed like fortified borders. I think about how standing up for what's right, even when it's uncomfortable, can create positive change that extends far beyond your own property line. As for the infamous HOA map that started it all, it's framed on my wall next to the updated, accurate version, a reminder that it's always worth knowing exactly where you stand. The next one is entitled People Story. My fiancé and I have what I thought was a really good, happy and stress-free relationship. We only got engaged 2 months ago, so we've barely started wedding planning, but we've been together for about 3 years total. I got a new job which tripled my salary and is in line with my career goals. She always wanted to live on the East Coast. She talked about that a lot before this opportunity even came up, so when I asked her if she would be interested in moving, she was really excited. With the promotion, we'll be able for her to start doing her hobby as full-time work if that's what she wants, so she was thrilled about the opportunity. We picked the house out and bought it together, and she was so excited to move in. The original plan was we would both fly out east on the 29th, which would give us a few days to paint the house and get some things ready for when the movers arrived on the 7th. She changed her mind last minute and said she would stay home to make sure everything went well with the movers. I flew back on the 4th, and we were going to drive back east after the movers left on the 5th because they wouldn't take our ATV or boat, so we had to haul them ourselves. She decided against this again because she thought it would be too long to sit in a car, and she said she would fly out yesterday. We booked a ticket and she was supposed to get in around midnight. Yesterday when I was about to leave to go to the airport, she texts me, "I'm not coming. I'm so sorry." I called her and she said she doesn't want to move anymore and can't explain why. By that I mean she can't figure out what it is that's making her not want to move. Not that she is choosing not to tell me. Then she says she doesn't want to talk and hangs up. I'm not really sure what happened. There wasn't a single sign that she wouldn't be coming. All of her stuff is here, including her laptop. So if this was planned in advance, I would be really surprised. I think maybe she's scared, but she tells me she isn't and she just wants some space. I know Reddit can't tell me what went wrong, but I'm not sure how to approach this. I just started a new job today, so I can't exactly take vacation to fly back home and try to convince my fiancé to move back with me. Should I even try to convince her at all? She's capable of making her own decisions and I don't want to treat her like she isn't. Or does it sound like I did anything wrong in the weeks leading up to this? I thought I was so careful about making sure she wanted to move, and it seemed like she did. She had the whole house layout and colors planned out on her Pinterest and she genuinely seemed so excited. Any advice is appreciated. Let me know if you think I might have left something out of the post that could help. Update: thanks for all the advice. I have a happy update for you. She showed up at my new job yesterday to surprise me and she's going to be staying out here. The reason she kept putting off moving was that she found out she is pregnant. It wasn't planned, and was scared to go through pregnancy and have the baby without her mom close by to help. She finally told her mom on Monday and her mom reassured her and bought her a plane ticket and sent her on her way. As exciting as that news is, she's known for about 2 months now and only told me yesterday, so clearly we have a lot to work on. We think there was just way too much going on at once, with the move, my new job, her quitting hers, our engagement, etc., and now the pregnancy. It was just too stressful for her. I'd appreciate any advice on how to make this easier for her. The next one is entitled People Story. For the last 4 years, my wife has been playing with a group that very quickly became close friends. Every Wednesday and Saturday night she would go on about epic tales and stories that she and her group would get into. Seeing her eyes light up as she talks about her tiefling artificer and his growth and development made my heart swell. She had been wanting to find a group that matches her energy and encourages creativity and told me she found it with them. I couldn't be more happy for her. With permission from the DM and players, I've sat in some of their sessions on Discord, just listening and watching, and found that everyone's energy was so infectious. They bounced ideas off each other. The DM allowed creativity and out-of-the-box thinking, even rewarded everyone for roleplay and solving issues without bashing people's skulls in. I was laughing with them, even felt my heartstrings tugged at emotional moments. I have to say, the DM was insanely great at storytelling and allowing everyone to be the character they wanted. Well, about 6 months ago, they ended their 4-year-long campaign and said goodbye to their beloved group. The DM mentioned she was going to start a new season set in the same world setting with a new adventure 100 years prior to the events that kicked things off. She DM'd me asking if I would like to be a player, and I enthusiastically replied with a hell yeah. I've been playing solo TTRPGs for a while because, like my wife, I've had bad table after bad table, and this seemed like the best opportunity for us both to play together with perhaps one of the best tables we've ever had. Over the last 5 months, DM has been contacting me and other players both in the public Discord and privately about our characters and the world. I asked her for anything and everything she had on the world setting, so that I could acclimate a character that would fit perfectly within it. I was given lore, and any questions I had, she promptly answered. I asked her what kind of limitations she had or requests, and she said as long as you play a good aligned character, we Gucci. Apparently she had some issues where people played evil, and even neutral characters, and it caused a whole issue. She wants to tell stories of the hero's journey and not worry about every villager being killed for having a bad attitude or looted of precious heirlooms. When I believed I had a good idea of what to expect, I created my character. We shared our character concepts like personalities, a bit of our backstories, classes, that sort of thing. There were so many unique traits that we all had, and it was looking like it would be diverse and amazing. The DM wanted us to have a few secrets in our backstory that we wouldn't share with the other members of the group, making for character surprises in-game. She did this in her last session and they loved it, giving them moments to discover about each other and some crazy roleplay scenes. My secret was that my character was abused and tortured by the gods of this world, a punishment for her bloodline from centuries ago. She was a tiefling runeblade warrior from an Asian-inspired home where she prayed to her ancestors to guide her. They were very spiritual and believed they could fight their inner curse by being better than their progenitor. Unfortunately, most of her family had gotten wiped out by the gods, leaving her and her siblings alive but scattered. Her goal is to find them and to confront the gods who had done that. The idea was fun, and we hashed out a lot of little details that would make it interesting within the story that was being told. I was all for it and for the drama it would bring. We all have tie-ins to other characters, so I was thrilled to get playing. We had our session 0 in which the characters had already started out knowing each other from attending the same academy. We took on a group mission, and it kick-started our main story. It was a blast and the roleplay was very good. And that's about where the fun ended for me. From that point on, everything became about crapping on my character. We would go into other towns because that is where the story would take us, But every town apparently did not like tieflings. Every single town. We went to a place with humans and immediately they refused to work with the group because they don't associate with cursed blood. We went to the city of elves, where the bulk of the story took place, and I had to sit out for 95% of it. The elves scoffed at her, but they were willing to work with the rest of the group. Not a single NPC would address my character, and my character wasn't allowed in any elven sacred places or inside their city, so she had to remain outside in the camp and fend for herself while the rest of the party would be welcomed. I brought up the issues I had. I told her that while I fully understand that there might be people who are untrusting of her, maybe there could be a way that someone might take some consideration to the fact that she's not a bad person. She gave it some thought and said that sounds reasonable. The next session, a player found a potion that could change one's appearance and snuck out to give it to my character. My character then had a moment of shame for being who she was, and the only way she'd be accepted is if she changed who she was entirely. It brought her more strength to prove that she was good, to prove to the world and the gods that she was worthy of being seen as a person and not some monster. There was a scene where she drank the potion and looked human, and then it went to the rest of the group. The group had a moment in which they were involved with the elven children that lasted most of the entire session. It was fun, as they got to engage with them and learn about some special alchemical potions, each of them being granted a bonus and buff for the remainder of their time there. When it finally came to my turn, my scene was of me getting into the elven city and finding one of the children who was part of the group who wanted to learn sword fighting. Since I was a runeblade, I felt I could help them and have a fun one-on-one moment like the group had. Nope. As soon as she said she was going to help, the DM went okay, you do that and have a fun sparring session, and then immediately went back to the group before ending the session. In a 6-hour session, I played for 15 minutes tops. I messaged the DM again, being as polite as I could about the frustrations. My wife and her friends are having so much fun, and it seems like when the DM is focusing on them, everyone is laughing and having a grand time. When we spoke, she told me that the elves are untrusting of anyone who isn't elven, even more so with cursed blood. I told her that there was an orc in the party who had a violent history, and the elves seemed perfectly fine with them. But somehow my character, who had been atoning for their curse for several generations prior, is seen as more untrustworthy. She explained that's just the way things are, but that's what my character was fighting for. I told her it wasn't fun to not be included in the group activities, and that I was feeling left out because of this. I asked if I could change the whole cursed bloodline plot and opt for something else, or just reroll, and she said not to worry about it because she had a whole story built in for it and it would all make sense when we get there. It only got worse from there. Several more sessions in, the characters had been guided by the elves to a ruined city where we were supposed to find out what happened. I picked up a relic and it burned me, which I had to take 11 radiant damage and had a permanent -1 to my strength score until I could get it cleared through some unknown means. My wife's character picked up the relic with a cloth and was blessed with light and had gotten a permanent +1 to her intelligence stat. It was a relic of her character's goddess who started off a major questline. The downside? She was one of the pantheon who deemed it necessary that my family's bloodline get wiped out. I didn't know what the hell to do. Why would my character be willing to help this goddess who killed her family and kept her and 2 siblings alive so they would live out the rest of their days in suffering and mourning? Why pit my character against the whole group? I asked my wife if this has happened before in their games and she said it didn't, but maybe the DM was hoping for more drama. I told her I wasn't having fun, and that I might just leave, but she wanted to play with me so badly that this was the first table we could sit at together and have fun. I'm not of the mindset of keeping to a bad table just because, but it is my wife and their previous campaign looked so much fun. I had to hope that by keeping open communication we could have a good experience. Things got mildly better with my character having some story beats. She found her older brother and saved him from an execution, and I had a little more role play from the other characters, but there were several moments where things felt like I was being picked on specifically. For instance, we had a scene where we were running from a giant, and the DM asked me specifically, "Tanya, what shoes are you wearing?" "Oh, Geta? Yeah, you have disadvantage on your rolls as the wooden platforms of your Geta are getting stuck in the crevices while running." And things like that. She wouldn't ask the others what they wore, or how they did things to give them disadvantages, just me. I wondered if it was because I was the only guy in the group, as this is an all-girls table, but I just can't help but feel as if I'm constantly being picked on while everyone else is not having to make extra challenge rolls, or have times where they aren't even a part of the plot for several sessions. I've spoken with her several times and even brought up the options to reroll or just politely bow out, but she's told me she has some grand plan for my character that I'll love and it ties into the overall story and the other characters, so leaving or re-rolling would ruin all that. I'm at an impasse here because my wife and her friends are having a great time, and if I leave, it will somehow ruin this great plot and their progress, but I dread sitting at the table twice a week for 6 hours a day and get to only chime in when I get any acknowledgement. from the NPCs who are even willing to talk to me. Update: I'll try to make this much shorter than my last ramble lol. So a few things that I want to clear up about this situation that I had many people asking me. 1. We were part of 4 tables previously. The first one was a group of college mates we had together that we thoroughly enjoyed, but it ended about 3 months in as the DM was going through a divorce and never picked it up again. After that, we had bad luck finding good tables. The first one, the DM was a very raw player and skipped all roleplay. Nothing wrong with that, but we found out that it wasn't necessarily what we were looking for. The other tables had some problem players whom the DM didn't do anything about, so we left as it would kill the jive of all the other players around too. My wife found this group on DNDB. It was advertised as a novice DM looking for players and not as an all-girls table. It just so happened that all the ones who contacted her were women 3. She had been telling me about her sessions pretty much from day one, as she was super excited to have found a table that worked for her. I stopped searching and did mostly solo as my new hobby, but I loved hearing about her adventures with other people. She told her group that she'd tell me about these adventures and how excited I was. The DM then extended an invitation to me to watch them via my wife and I could sit in their Discord. I personally asked her permission and the group's permission if I could. I was fully intended to give them space if even one said no. They all agreed and I sat in for the last 3 months of their session. We had all gotten along pretty well. 5. At the end of their campaign, DM told me that they were going to start a new one up a few months after that ended, and asked if I wanted to make a character. I was excited to join since they all seemed really chill, and asked if that was okay with the group. Everyone agreed and were very welcoming. 6. I came to the DM with a different storyline than what we decided on. She liked my idea but wanted to add a little flavor with a scenario between the gods of that world, saying that it fit a vision she had for the story. She didn't tell me what that vision was, but from what I saw she was a great storyteller and I'm very flexible and can play into whatever she drums up for me. I did not know that this vision would then have me out of the game for almost all the social RP stuff. Sure, she came in handy for the mechanics and during fights, but any kind of RP with NPCs or main story plot was non-existent. 7. It wasn't always bad, just during big roleplay moments and some strange rolls that I had to make, but there were moments I had fun. It just wasn't the majority of it. I stuck through because my wife enjoyed me playing with her, and the group always seemed outwardly friendly. I was really trying to give it a shot. Now for the update. I talked it over with my wife and she understood how I felt. She admitted she was in a hard place because she loved this group so much and it was the first time she felt like she could express herself, but also play in a game with me that was reminiscent of our first group. She agreed that we would have a one-on-one video chat with the DM privately and discuss any possible ways to make this fun for us all. I even said that if she was going a certain way, to give me some info and I can play up to it. What I basically got was, "I'm sorry you feel that way and can't handle some confrontation within game." My wife explained that confrontation is one thing, but I wasn't given a fair shot to prove myself. She, DM, was not happy and said if I didn't want to play in her game, I can hang out with the boys and do my own thing. Right then and there I got my answer and politely said she's right. I thanked her for her time and said that I'd be leaving. I told her she had full access to my character and whatever plan she wanted for her, and she thanked me before we ended the call. Shortly after that she kicked my wife and I out of the Discord and blocked us. I feel so bad for her, wife, because she was honestly hurt, but she said she stands by my decision. This happened Wednesday after our game, and I know she's hurt. My heart breaks because I know she's hurt, but I told her she could take that same character and we could play a solo D&D session together. Are you hungry for more slices of stories? Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell to never miss out on any videos. See you tomorrow at Story Slices.